Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have my new friend, the lovely, the extravagant, the just beautifully radiant Whitney Walker on the episode today with me. Whitney, thank you for joining me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Caleb.
I've been very excited about hanging with you again. I don't know if you've listened to any episodes. I really actually have no idea who listens to my podcast. I know my mom does. That's it. Actually, I just know that it is my mom, and maybe I don't even know if she's reviewed it or not, but I got my mom at least as one devoted listener.
There you go. If you can reach one person, that's what matters.
Yes. Thanks, Mom. I start every episode with why I appreciate my guest, and this is my small effort in the direction of world inner peace, because I believe we need to start telling each other why we love each other. I think it's a pretty obvious way to start. So to that effect, I love how our relationship has been building, and that we've connected on like the spiritual stuff. I love that. But the nice part about you as well that I really appreciate, because a lot of people get so deep into the woo stuff, they fail, as my dog is chiming in his love as well in the background, they fail to keep it grounded. And I think that that's really special for somebody to be able to be very practical, but also hold space for deeper, more esoteric, ethereal type of conversation. But I find that that's a very beautiful and empathetic way of being able to connect with anybody on any level. And I really appreciate that, because it's not easy to talk about some of those things and then still make it so it's useful every day. Man, he is emphatic. Are you hearing this barking in the background?
I can't hear him. No,
you can't?
It's not, no, the mic's not picking it up. So it looks like you're being upset by a ghost.
You know what? We're talking spiritual stuff. Here we go. I'm getting upset by a ghost. We have the ghost of Tyson Past in the background. You get away at me. Ty, here you go, buddy. Here, I got a treat for you. Come here. But I want to let you, Ty, right here. I got a treat. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for joining the show too, mister. Okay. It's right there at your feet. I just want to say thank you for being awesome. That's really it. That's all. I find that so deeply valuable, especially at this place in my life, that I want to be around people who can go deep, but also can be real at the same time. So,
well, thank you. Right back at you.
Thanks. Making me all bashful. Let's do this. Let's let yourself introduce yourself to the audience today. So, Whitney, who are you?
Thank you. Well, now I almost want to call myself the practical spiritualist or something. I like the shout out for, because that's really what I hope to carry out in my work. I am a therapist. So by profession, I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I have a private practice that's completely virtual. So I'm also a nomad, and I've been traveling around the country for about 2 years now, with a little detour back home for a while when I was experiencing some health issues. And I specialize in addiction, substance abuse, eating disorders, trauma. Addiction and eating disorders being two things that I personally experienced. I've been sober for 8 years from drugs, alcohol, all the stuff. And that was a big part of my spiritual journey, and what we could call spiritual awakening, opening, where I began to experience a shift in sort of what I was focusing on for my life and my work, and sort of my ideas about life and myself. So to your point, Caleb, I do, I see almost like being, and I think a lot of us are in this place, but it's like knowing my previous self and my current future self, where I know what it's like to be in the trenches, right? To be really attached to things, to be really, feeling beholden to core false beliefs that keep us in a state of self-rejection, self-destruction, self-harm, addiction, all of these things. And also just to feel pretty shitty about who you are and have a really hard time accepting yourself, which to me are all create an imprisonment, essentially. And so for me, when I started my work, and I became a therapist, I'd been sober for a while, and I thought, well, what do I most want to help people with, right? Because you get, they give you a license as a therapist. You're like, well, dang, I guess I'm official now. I guess I'm legit. Like, I don't know. They gave it to me, so I must be ready to go speak to people and help them. And I thought, well, what do I must want to help people with? And I thought, well, I want to help people who felt like I used to feel, which was incapable of having a healthy relationship with myself and others. which was incapable of feeling like I could accept myself and not be very critical and scrutinize and, self-destruct essentially. So that's what I try to do. And in doing so, I think it's important to meet people where they're at. Right. And I'm grateful for everybody out there that's doing their thing. I think we're all offering what's coming to us, and that's what we all need. But some people who are like really far into the spiritual world, it feels kind of detached, right? It's like, wow, that's awesome. But I don't think I'll ever feel that way. Like this, ethereal cosmic being that's just detached from any of life problems. Because I also believe that we are on earth for a reason. We're having this experience for a reason. And it's not to just be only in the, sort of higher mind all the time. Right.
I think that also, if we think we're always in that higher mind, you brought out something in there like I think connecting into pain, not in like I'm attaching my identity to it, but also knowing how to the pain is like the discomfort that challenges to grow. And I think it's what actually gives meaning to those moments of higher reckoning, or whatever you want to call it, the higher connection, like, oh, I get it. And I feel like, you ever heard what's it? It's like I'd give a nickel to be on one side of simple, and the other I'd give my left arm to be on the other side of where like the complex, where it's simple, complex, simple, where there's a child says something so profound, then you go trying to like live all this life and you build all this complex theories around, and then you get back to like you say the same thing, but that wise old man says it, and you're like, that hits, man. It's because of the weight and the discomfort and the pain and the suffering and all the learning opportunities that came through all of that. But if we only stay just in the simplicity, it doesn't have the depth that the other side provides, or the understanding that we have there. And I think that's what I was hearing in that. So you were struggling with addiction, sobriety, that kind of stuff. Was that after, like when you were already a therapist, or was that beforehand?
That was before.
Okay.
I got sober when I was finishing up my master's degree. So I was on my track to get licensed, and I hit 29. It was like right before I was about to turn 29. And I'd moved home. I'd been living in Seattle, getting my master's, and I transferred to a school in California so I could live with my parents while I had to do, my practicum, which is basically an unpaid internship, and had to still go to school. So I just felt overwhelmed and wanted to go back and just focus on finishing school. And I was, that whole summer of like 2014, I was just like on one, just like on a bender, just kind of started to feel really out of control. And like, I just didn't care. And I just wasn't holding myself accountable. And I just wanted to escape. And I came to like late in the summer, and I realized I just had this awareness moment where I thought, you're going to be 30 in a year. And if you carry on this way, this could really spiral out of control. And I asked myself, I said, well, who do you want to be? Like, who is the woman that you want to be? And all I knew was to say, not this, not somebody that I can't really respect or trust. Those were the two things. Because when I was drinking and using, I didn't trust myself. I would say like, okay, I'm just going to have like, go out tonight and have like 2 drinks and it'll be fine. And I would end up waking up the next morning, not knowing where I was or what happened. I would black out. And I couldn't respect myself because I was making decisions that were not very kind to myself, that were not very responsible. And so in that moment, I thought, I want to be a woman that is, classy and has integrity and is a role model for others who want to live in their truth, that want to inspire others, that want to, have a strong work ethic and character. Right. And I was like, I don't feel that way when I drink and use. So I made that choice then and there. I was like, well, then I'm going to stop drinking, because when I look at these two paths, if I drink, there's a really good chance that I can't become that woman I want to be. If I stop drinking, it's not a guarantee, but it feels much more likely that I can become somebody that's aligned with my values and my vision and my purpose that I have for life. Because for me, drinking was the one thing that just kept me recreating and re-experiencing the same things that I didn't want to have in my life. Right. So I made that choice. And that was when I finished school, and I got, I had to do a few years getting my hours, and then I got licensed. And I knew I wanted to work in addiction, because I did end up going to 12-step programs and such as I got sober, because I realized, which most of us do, that it wasn't just alcohol, right? It wasn't just that I had a problem with drinking, right? I had problems that drove me to seek out comfort, escapism, soothing, all those things. And I used alcohol and pills and other stuff, but it wasn't those other things that were the issue, right? So I wanted to find out why I did this and what I could do to sort of resolve and heal within. And as I began that healing process, I really became more aware that there was more to this than just, what we typically think of, right? Which is like things that happened in our past and misconceptions. It's, it's a bigger it's a spiritual disconnect is what I would call it. We don't know who we really are. And so we don't know how to value and love ourselves. We think that love for ourselves is conditional, and that if we've done something or something has happened to us in our past, or if we didn't achieve or establish ourselves as we hoped, that we can't love or accept ourselves. And that's what really hit with me was, why aren't we more aligned with the spiritual understanding of ourselves? Why are we so attached to this egoic idea of ourselves that I am only what I do, or how I'm perceived, or how I look, or how successful I am, how much money I have, all these things, right? We don't want to look inside. We don't give much value to our eternal essence. And that's where the spiritual stuff comes in, right? So that is sort of that one foot in the physical world, which is like, I hear you. I hear that we're all having this physical challenge. Let's talk about it. But also let's keep one foot in the spiritual, which is remember your infinite potential and your infinite value and worth. Both are coexisting. So, suffice to say that all of this led me on this journey towards the spiritual opening, where once I had kind of addressed a lot of sort of the underbelly of my addiction, information just started coming in. Like Women Waken is based on, in 2019, I started being drawn more towards the spiritual realm. And I took a trip to the UK, which is where my family's from. My last name's Walker. So, right, there's like English, Scottish, Irish heritage that I have in my family. And when I came back, it was like, my ancestors had just like sent me this strong, like they had drawn me there and had given me this message of like, you need to work with women, and there needs to be a stronger presence for the feminine in this world. And I was like, what? Like, yeah, that's cool and all, but like, why are you telling me this? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And so it just kind of came to me. And then I found that there's a whole community around like this idea of the divine feminine, and that our world is completely imbalanced with like too much masculine energy. And we need to bring in that feminine energy, which is connection with the divine, with divine knowing of our inherent worth. And that all made sense to me. I was like, yeah, that's the problem. I don't know that I have inherent worth. So I'm trying to prove my worth constantly. And it's exhausting. Most of us are, right? We're pushing ourselves to prove ourselves, which isn't like, there's nothing wrong with exerting and creating, right? Again, that one foot in the physical, like we are here to create and to make things happen and just to see what we're made of. That's all exciting. But what the problem is when we base our worth on it, right? The problem is when we say, I'm only good if I can achieve this, if I can create this, if I can be this. So that's where I came up with Women Awaken. And I kind of made that the basis of my private practice, which I was able to start once the pandemic hit, because all I needed was a laptop and a computer, which also sent me on my life as a nomad. Because I thought, if I can do this anywhere, then I might as well go see some places, right? And I love it. I feel like a little butterfly. I don't know if I'll ever settle down, probably eventually, but I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with butterfly life. Like maybe it's a whole new, way of being that we can start adapting again, is like, people don't have to always live the standard life. They're welcome to, but there's a lot of different ways to live life that I think we don't open ourselves to. Where Caleb, you and I talked in our first conversation about kind of breaking out of the boxes or feeling like we were maybe stuck in boxes, which I know you were in part of your life, around like whether it's religion or like family ideals or your community surroundings, what they tell you, what you should do, who you should be. So yeah, sorry. That's a big explanation for who I am, but that's it.
I love it. I love it. That was a great response. I ask that question that way all the time, exactly that way, because I want to hear how people see themselves. It's, and I don't, obviously your work as a therapist, I'm sure you see this, but like the fundamental piece of all of this is we can't answer who we are. We don't know who we are. What are you building a life on top of? And that what I heard in there, what you were saying, it's like most people define themselves by the external. The job I have, my worth is by how many accolades I got and how many ribbons I got on trophies and blah, blah, blah. That's all fragile. And all of those things could be wiped out in a moment.
Yeah.
If we are solid in our who we are, you can build a real life on that. And I think what was important there is you're talking about this nomadic lifestyle. For starting, I think it was like if you feel at home within yourself, everywhere you go is home, and everywhere you go is stable and you can nurture the growth that you want to have there, however that looks. But if you don't, I think of it like the nesting type of thing. Like, oh my God, I need to put a bunch of stuff around and make me, I gotta have the big house. I gotta have all the stuff to feel like, okay, now I'm ready to have a kid or settle down or whatever, as opposed to just like, I'm good on me and I'm adaptable because I know about myself and I know what I can do with relationships. I know what I can do in building connections. You can feel safe and create safety everywhere you are, which is scary because you have to take time to cultivate enough self-awareness to know what your strengths are, who you are, how you define that. That's why I like asking that question that way. And I especially love when I get the texture and the context about, oh, this is how I came to be what I am. Because how do you answer all that you are in, a breath? Like maybe we should shut up and listen to how people think about themselves, and maybe we'll know a lot more. And maybe we'll be less judgmental because we'll probably see a lot of our own stories in that. I loved how you described your path to all of this. Where, like, how did you start like some of your spiritual practice? I think that's like, well, it's a 1A, 1B. First, like, I see that moment you shared, like that was kind of like my spiritual awakening. Was there something right before that happened? I know a lot of stuff is like some tragedy or some big like, oh shit moment happens for somebody like, oh, obviously there was that. Was there something right beforehand? You're like that facilitated that conversation, that opened the thought of your mind, like, huh, there's consequences if I don't solve this. And was there anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would think that the seeds were first sown early in life. I mean, I've always been a bit of a seeker and sort of an explorer, like sort of always questioning, like from a very young age, I was like, why do we do it this way? Like, what's up with this place? Like, why? I always questioned everything. And whether it was like at school or through churches. And I was like, how do you know that? Like, how you're telling us that this is fact, but is it like, is this how things work? I was always very curious. So I was always kind of like searching and seeking. And then when I was in my 20s, I didn't get sober yet, but I did have a sort of bottoming out moment where, I was realizing that I was so attached to externals and all I wanted was approval and acceptance from others. And it was so devastating to me. And it was, after I had a breakup and I just realized how dependent and that the whole relationship was just based on being accepted. I didn't even know if I knew who this person was or if I really liked them or they liked me. All that mattered was that, I was accepted, I was chosen. And I realized I was like, how can you know how you feel about yourself if you're just waiting for other people to tell you that you're good enough or who you are, right? Like you just asked, like, who are you? A lot of people don't know. As a therapist, my favorite question, people don't like it, but I'll always ask my clients, we'll be talking and we'll talk about, well, what are some things that you do? And they'll explain some of their problems, their pain points. And I'll say, well, who are you? And they'll look at me like I have two heads and they're like, what? Like, what kind of a question is that? I'm like, well, it's actually the most basic question that you could ever ask somebody. And 99% of the time people say, I don't know. I don't know who I am. And they say, well, I have this job and I'm a mother and no. Those are your titles. If you take off all those hats, who are you? Right. So again, back in my 20s, I was kind of having that existential moment where I was like, who am I? Like, I'm begging other people to help define me, but who am I? And so that's when I first started going. I went to my first metaphysical bookshop and I found a book that was so beautiful. And the premise of the book, like on the front cover, I forget the name of the book. It was something like Your Core Brilliance or something, but it said to love yourself from the outside in is a doomed prospect. And that hit my little 25-year-old self, because I said, that's how I live my life. I'm trying to love myself from the outside in, right? Okay, if I look the right way and get the right things and have the right status, then, but that's not what it's about, right? It's an inside job. So that was like the first little kernel, but then I was, still caught up in drugs and other addictions and alcohol, that stuff. But you asked, like, what was the real awakening moment? Well, once I got sober and I did start doing AA 12-step groups, and they were really valuable for me for a long time. I did it for about 4 years. And one of their tenets, right, their 12 steps is, I think, is it the last one? It's been a while. It's been like 4 years since I've been out of the program, but it's basically like you have a spiritual awakening and you're more open. You think I'd remember the steps. You talk about them every time you're in the room. Anyways, and I did. I called it a spiritual opening, because the longer I went to those meetings and did that work, I was opening to new understandings. And interestingly enough, but nothing's a coincidence. Synchronicity is real. Things started coming into my life, like different books and different people who had different spiritual concepts that I had never thought of. And I was starting to be like, wait, is there more to life than just obsessing over myself and like whether or not I get the things I wanted to get and have, all these different things. And I was like, there's something else going on here. So that was my first awakening of like, wow, there's new understandings about life that I'm becoming aware of. And to me, that's what a spiritual awakening is, right? It's not necessarily like, again, like you just become this ethereal being who's above it all. You just start to realize you open your awareness, right? Of the way things are, of that maybe things aren't exactly what you thought they were. And maybe you don't have to live a certain way or do this or that, right? So that was a big pivotal point. And that really accelerated me to think, well, what do I want to do with this, position that I'm in, where I'm now a licensed therapist and I get to meet with people and be in that sacred space of true connection and, honesty, right? I believe that when people speaking the truth is the most beautiful sound in the world, because it doesn't happen very much, right? Like if you think about it, we were just talking about social media before this call, Caleb, and you go on there and you're just being doused in a lot of falsehoods, right? And not to say that all of it is false. There's some beautiful sentiments that can be found on social media, but a lot of times I'll ask people like, oh my gosh, I loved your post. And they're like, oh yeah, that was just a nice picture, but I'm having a really hard time and my life is it's like, what? I thought you were doing great. So my point is that there's not a lot of truth in our world, because again, we don't really know who we are. So we feel like we have to project this image and ideal about ourselves. But when you're in those rooms of therapy, not to say that everybody's always honest in therapy, because I'll tell you, they're not. As a therapist, like you think that people are coming with their hearts open, but people are still guarded, right? But when it's such a sacred thing. So I thought, what can I do now that I have my own practice and I can have my own spin on it? What do I want to focus on? And I wanted to focus on the spiritual work and help people, because my main tagline would be, I want to help people have a greater sense of peace and freedom, right? And to me, freedom is when you unchain yourself from these misconceptions that keep us bound, right? Because by nature, human beings are free. There's a great quote that says, humans are free, yet everywhere we live in chains. And because so many of us tie ourselves, we chain ourselves to concepts and beliefs that keep us just grinding and pushing for something that we never had to do in the first place. Everything's created in our head in terms of chains and beliefs that hold us back. So that was a pivotal point that really accelerated me. And then, other stuff started happening where my concepts expanded and I started realizing that some of the people that had been my oldest friends, I no longer really connected with. And some of the institutions I was once a part of, I didn't feel connected to. And I just started kind of shedding things, just letting it go, and not with malice or anger, but just it didn't align anymore. And that's, for anyone listening, that can be the scary part of a spiritual awakening. If you're starting to have that, is that it's not just like these beautiful ideas or a sense of peace. That's part of it, but it's also, you are literally evolving right? You're shifting, you're changing into a new version of yourself. Your soul is really starting to come through in a way it wasn't before. And so certain things that you used to value and feel aligned with are no longer. And that can be scary because you're like, well, how can I not feel connected to this old friend or this family member? And it's because, sometimes we move on and we have to be brave and trust that we're going to connect with the people that we're meant for at new chapters of our lives.
There's a couple mic drop moments there though. I can't wait to edit this podcast and like just listen back to the things you just said. There was um two things that came up there. One of them is more just a reflection, kind of just keeps coming up, is that all growth is spiritual growth. And that moment you just brought up here at the end, I think that most people don't consciously know of or are aware of, but subconsciously is what actually is holding them back from taking the steps, is this fear of being alone that you're talking about. I'm going to move away from certain people in my life, not because they're bad, not because whatever, just like because we grow apart. And I saw that back in the day at the gym. There's kind of like this constant theme, and I always suggest couples, if you're married, like if possible, start your health journeys together, because of the very concept that the weight or the out of alignment with your health, feel like whatever the thing is, wanting to get in shape, it's not about that. It's about something inside is saying, I need to change. And in the beginning, it's this little gap. But if you and your partner that you've already built a life together, like the gap starts to get a little bigger and a little bigger. And then one day you're like, well, why is this other person not changing? And one of two things happens is there's an ending. Well, maybe three things. It ends, divorce. Or they stay together. Like the other person comes along, like, wow, I need to, like, I see I'm inspired, which I don't see that as often. And the other one, which is probably the most heartbreaking, is that person who is growing is too afraid to keep going. So they just go back to settling and just and like mail in their dreams. So I think that was something that I think if people were more aware of, that that's the actual thing they're afraid of. People want to be like, I don't care what people think. Well, the person you just built a life with, friends, family, otherwise, probably were the first people that made you feel. You mentioned it with an ex, made you feel like you were validated. You felt probably maybe for the first time you felt like, oh, somebody sees me, somebody gets me, even though it's not fully seeing. Perhaps it feels nice to be wanted or desired or whatever that is. In all of this, though, where I was thinking about this, I just had a session with a client, and we were talking at the end about, and I don't know why it was coming up, but a lot of it, like, to me, freedom is on the other side of forgiveness. And she also was in recovery. She's been, I think, almost a decade in sober. And what I was hearing there, I think that that's something that not a lot of people think about, like the process of forgiving along the path. I'd love to get some of your take on that, in that journey, if there's been any kind of palpable or really poignant moments for you or with clients. Because I think so many people are riddled with weird guilt and anger and shame and resentment, either towards themselves or towards others. And that is just holding them bound to the change you were talking about before.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say, Caleb, thank you for reminding me that I actually did a solo episode recently on the power of forgiveness. And I was partly inspired by, you put a little tidbit or something, a little clip on Instagram, and you said, freedom is on the other side of forgiveness. And I was like, that's brilliant. I'm going to use that line in my episode. And I did. And because it's so true. It's so true. Yet it's one of the hardest things, because, and then I also did an episode on anger, because the two go hand in hand. A lack of forgiveness is usually too much of an attachment to our anger, because anger is not a pleasant feeling, but yet it can feel almost like this like indignant sense of, I have a right to be angry. I was wronged. I got screwed over. Bad things happened to me, and I am so angry. And people can really identify with their anger, right? I mean, we see that all over our country right now, where people are on either side of a lot of issues, and their fervor and their anger is giving them a sense of identity, a sense of identification with, these are my people, because we're up in arms about this. And I'm not saying, I'm not, insulting anyone or judging anyone, because there's a lot going on right now, right? Again, we're human beings, we're evolving all the time. We're coming up about big issues, right? Like, who are we as a people? What do we stand for? What are our values? That's what's behind all of these societal issues that are happening right now. But again, there's a lot of anger behind it. Forgiveness, as you spoke to, is truly the key to letting go of that anger. It really melts away this sense of, again, like this just like fiery anger. And the challenge with forgiveness is that you have to recognize that we can never truly understand someone else's experience, right? So, but when we do, I heard that something that really stuck with me in one of the books that I read that was a part of my spiritual journey. It's called Conversations with God. If anybody's heard of it, it's by Neil Donald Walsh. It's a man who, like, when he hit 50, he was frustrated with life and was like, basically like, shaking his fist to the heavens. And he started channeling what he was told was source, God, spirit, whatever you have, and by the way, I initially like wrote off the book because I was like, nope, that's whatever, that I don't relate to it. But then I read it and I was like, wow, this actually speaks to a lot of the things that I've always felt just inherently to be true about ourselves, about life, but I've never heard it written. Anyways, in that book, it speaks to the idea that the key to forgiveness is understanding. If we can understand somebody, we can forgive. And I use the analogy, if you've ever like gone to the store or gone somewhere and someone was a total asshole to you and you're like, what the heck is their problem? They suck. They're the worst. And then you go out to your car and you see them crying at their car and you're like, are you okay? And they're like, oh, I just found out that this happened and that happened. I'm just so sad and frustrated and I feel so lost. And you're like, and your anger just melts away because you have understanding. You say, oh gosh, that wasn't about me. And 90% of the things people do are not about us, right? It's coming from their own experiences, their own frustrations. So when we gain understanding, then we can forgive. And when I work with people on forgiveness, it is about that journey to understand what might have been going on for that person, or what was the side of the situation that I might not be able to see, or the hardest thing, which is to forgive ourselves. And that's when we have to have understanding for that past version of ourselves that at that time was doing the best that they could, right? That was a big thing for me in getting sober, because just as you said, there's that shame, there's that guilt, and you can't take it back, because the one thing that we cannot do is change the past. We can't do it. And so you can spend your whole life regretting and feeling guilt around what was done. And there's nowhere for it to go except for just become almost like a tumor, right? And I believe, that a lot of physical ailments and physical diseases are the result of held guilt and shame, because it's such a dense energy that creates a constriction in the flow of energy through our body, which has repercussions. So we gain understanding and we say, I still feel guilt around this, yet how can I shed some light on understanding where I was at that point, or that there maybe was no other means for me to conduct myself, or whatever it is, right? And so you try to exercise some understanding, because that will allow you for forgiveness. And then forgiveness, once you experience it, will give you freedom. Because again, it's unlocking that part of us that's keeping ourselves tied. Just like I was talking to, all those chains that we have around us. When we forgive, it's like, whoa, I was free the whole time. I was choosing to bind myself to this belief that I needed to stay angry because I could not forgive myself or others.
I think that is so important for people to hear. And the guilt and shame thing, it's wild how many people are riddled with it. I don't see anybody who's not. And I think something that came to mind as you were sharing that this desire to understand, I think the prerequisite for that is Ty, you're being rude, sir. The prerequisite to that is a profound level of humility, because essentially to say I want to understand is to also acknowledge I don't know. And the ego wants to hold on to I'm right. But when you say I don't know, it's like I might be wrong. And I'm okay with myself enough to say, I want to hear you out. maybe I'm not like, what am I missing here? I need to show me the full picture. And I think that example you used was really powerful. It made me think about, I mean, it's something I saw on Instagram, so I don't know if it's a real story or not, but the a guy reacting on a train. He's like, I'm on a train and I saw these kids running around there being these little terrors, whatever. And there's this man in the back of the train. It's his kids, and he's just like sitting there doing nothing. And eventually the guy gets up and goes, speaks to the guy like, hey, what's going on with your kids? And the guy reacts like, oh, I'm so sorry. Their mother just died and we're coming back from the funeral. I clearly, like, I don't really know how to handle what's going on right now. And like, huh. And one would hope that if you were in the same position, somebody, instead of being like, well, get your effing kids together, like, man, you're just disturbing everybody else's peace, would just go like, huh, you're fucking hurting, man. And I wouldn't wish that pain on my worst enemy. If we could maybe lean in with that kindness and I think a generosity of saying, like, I'm extending you the benefit of the doubt, like, you might have just come from something that is unspeakable. I don't know what you just came from. The space between that anger, I think, is, but I mean, you take a self-aware person to slow down and make space for that, because that's when we're feeling, I guess, existentially attacked. All we want to do is just, I win, I master the moment, I'm in control, I'm back to my state of like good, but not realizing we might have just laid an extra world of hurt on somebody else, perhaps adding to our own internal guilt along that. So I think that what you're saying there about that is, I feel like humility is such an underrated and under not fully understood, like, profound skill to work on. I think it can be cultivated and developed. It's not something we can ever perfect, because no matter how right you feel about something, like, you still might be wrong about something. I don't know, especially things of like spirituality, God, universe, existence. Everybody's got an opinion, and the reality is we don't know. When I see people just get so like hell bent on like, my thing's right, like, cool, prove it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do have some questions about anger, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hi, I've already fed you and I've already taken you outside. You got to chill, homie. Um, I can't, what am I thinking about? There's like this energy scale that I saw once about how low, like, guilt and shame and what are very low in the energy scale, and then there's like different rising things to push you up the scale. Man, I really wish I could remember what it's called. My buddy brought it up to me not that long ago. But when he had mentioned, he brought out like how anger is useful, and for me, I know I've had to use. I detached myself from anger for a while because I didn't like how I behaved, because I didn't know how to use, like, what it was going on there, and I realized I let anger turn into hate, as opposed to, I can be angry, feel angry about a situation, but I don't need to turn it into loathing or resentment. Um, I saw that anger used appropriately, actually, it was like almost like lighter fluid to get me through like a sticking point. But I found on my journey so far was learning how to use discernment of not letting it turn into, I think you brought it up as an identity, like, I'm an angry person. Could you elaborate a little more on some of that, give a little more insight of like, it's perhaps the utility of anger?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is perfect because I just released my solo episode today on anger. So I was like editing it and looking over it last night. So I did a big
I
deep
didn't
dive,
know.
and I've been going through my own personal journey of anger recently because I had some, experiences with some people, and like anger was like flaring up. And actually a few things this year. It's been a year because of that. And you are spot on, Kayla, because at first I was fighting it. I was like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so angry? There's something wrong with me. I'm bad. Cause I'm a therapist, right? So I'm supposed to be like, I should be calm. I should be able to let this go. But I was like, I can't, like, and it felt like it was coming through me. And I was like, and I remember connecting with a friend, and she was like, anger's not bad. Like this, you probably need to feel this, like, let yourself feel this. And I was like, you're right. Like, I know it will pass, but at first I need to feel this go through me, because there's something there, because it really is almost a catalyst, because what it can do is help you identify, why are you angry? What is it? Because just like anything else, you want to get down to the few core things. And often, we do want to be mindful that sometimes anger is because we're not understanding a situation, but sometimes it's because our boundaries are being violated. Our human needs are being violated, right? If we are pushed in a workplace and we don't feel that we're respected or that we're considered or that we're acknowledged, we are human beings and we're not meant to be workhorses without any source of sustenance, right? We need sustenance. So sometimes anger is an indication of, this doesn't work for me. This isn't working. I feel oppressed. I don't feel good. I feel frustrated. Let it come through. Other times anger can be a misconception, right? Just as we were talking about, we think that someone is being a dick to us because they just want to be a dick, but it turns out they have their own issues going on, right? I know for me, one of my biggest challenges, especially in early romantic relationships, was making assumptions. I would get called out because I'd be like, you think that, and you did. And they're like, how do you know what I'm thinking? Why don't you ask me first? I'd be like, I don't want to ask you. I already know because I know everything, because that can come out, right? When we, and we're like, no, I don't want you to tell me. I have already figured you out. We need to listen to people. We need to ask questions, but that can be hard when we're already in anger. So that's when it can be good to take space, right? And be like, I'm in my anger zone. I'm in the red zone. I need to wait before I send this text, before I have this conversation. Because right now, I just want to tell you off, but I don't want to do that. I want to take some space. But it also is true that I think some people can get into self-identification with anger. And just like what I was saying about, our society these days is, this is my cause and I'm angry about it. And that's who I am. And again, I want to be delicate with that, because there are people who say you need anger. If people hadn't been angry, then we would never have turned over, the segregation laws or the voting rights for women. There's some truth there, right? So there's value in anger. If, again, that violation feeling of saying, this is a violation of my boundaries, of my rights. So I will express anger towards this. However, anger, when it's not a healthily expressed and experienced, becomes rage. And rage is dangerous. And rage is because, people will describe when they've been with an abusive partner, that when they abused them, it was like they were gone behind the eyes. And rage can take over where you almost dissociate, because you're so just to the boiling point of not being able to sit with your emotions that your soul almost just kind of leaves for a minute, and you're just left to be this reactive being, which is a dangerous thing. You're basically a wild animal, right?
Yeah, what that brought to mind, there's a quote that I hear often lately, and I reflect on it. It has a lot. Why this came up is learning how to use wild animal, tame that, and know how to use the tool. And it's how the quote goes, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than the gardener in the war. And I think a lot about that for myself, is that knowing, like, there was the discipline in my life of, hey, I've felt these things, but as you grow, that you can't light off the handle. And by I can't is because I've decided I don't want to. Like, that's not the man I want to be representing myself as. But knowing how to tap into something like that, like, what if I have to defend my family or something along those lines, is knowing how to use that for a specific thing. I'm going to share an experience of how I used this last year, or through this year, a few times actually. I'd be curious to hear your take on it, but I was really torqued off, and it was literally about a year ago. Right at this moment, I was dealing with some business thing that didn't work out for me, and an investment that I was pretty frustrated with. Didn't feel valued, didn't feel appreciated, and I've reflected a lot about, like, this feels like I've had my, and it was, because I'm big, like, your word is your bond kind of situation. That was violated. Ty, it's right there, buddy. I was there one night, and I was like boiling hot, sitting there in bed, like clenching my fist, ready to just lose it. And I don't know what happened, but I was thinking about these things of, like, instead of letting this turn, because I realized in my past that I had let it boil, and then I would just like suppress it, and then just like one day some random thing I would just whatever light off. But here is like, how can I use this? Because I still need to be productive in work. I'm pivoting here. I have a new thing. I have some more responsibilities I need to take back on. So whatever it was, I don't know why I did, but I felt all this pressure up in my head, and that's where the hotness was. And for some reason, I decided, like, I envisioned my stomach as like a furnace, and that's where like all this creative energy that I actually had, that I was like screaming to get out, I like took it, and then I envisioned it going like down into my belly, and then I was going to burn it up, and I was going to use it for like creative fuel in the morning. I had like creative writing I had been putting off for a while. It's actually when it like really launched me into writing my book. But I don't know why, but that felt was like, it was so productive for me to do that. And I also found, come here, Ty. I also found an interesting, I found an interesting gratitude in the person and people that I felt had wronged me. I no longer saw them as my enemy. I started to see them as like, thank you for being the igniter fluid to challenge me to let more of my real voice out. I wasn't like, something was bottled up here in my like my throat chakra. I wasn't speaking my truth as fully as I could. This They propelled me into that place, and sometimes I know I can operate from that. So it was a really interesting experience, and I used it several times over the past year to get me through some challenging things. So I'd be curious to hear your take on that. I don't know if other people do something like that, but that was what worked for me.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that was a true up leveling moment where something where, your head could have proverbially popped off with this anger of just getting in the space of fuck these people. They screwed me over. I'm fucking pissed. They told me one thing. I'm true to my word. They weren't, just these things that we can tell ourselves, but something switched for you, which to me is a part of our evolution where we realize that there are a million different ways to see a situation. And I feel like you were given some guidance to be like, can you take this and bring this from your head down into your solar plex, which just as you said, is the boiler room. It's the engine for all creative energy, and it needs that fuel. So I feel like it was like, thank you. You just got a bunch of, what's that, kindling, whatever, that gets the fire stoked up, right? You like poured some gas on it, and it was like, awesome. And then isn't that interesting that you can shift from being so mad at these people to having gratitude for them? And it makes you realize how powerful our belief is. I mean, the truth is that belief governs all of our behaviors. And if you can switch to going from seeing something as the worst thing that ever happened to you to the best thing, that was a shift in your belief, just because you've decided a different belief. So beliefs are very powerful in that way. And it's a step in evolution where you start to bless every experience that comes into your life. And it's one of the hardest things to do, because yours came in the form of feeling wronged, feeling gypped, feeling screwed over. That's a terrible feeling. It's a violation, right? However, when you're able to see, there's again, from that same book that I spoke of, it said, I've given you nothing but angels, and I've brought you nothing other than blessings. So basically saying that every person you meet is an angel. That's a little hard to take, right? It's like, are you sure? I don't know about that. But if you can see, like, some of the worst rejections I've experienced were a catalyst towards my transformation, because it made me recognize, things about myself, things about why I was so attached to this person, whatever it was. And it propelled me forward. So when we can start to do, I mean, this is like high up the scale, right? This is like getting more to Buddha level, where you're like, yes, I accept things as they are all the time. But when you start to see, but here's the thing, we're talking about the value of anger. Let yourself be mad first. If you try to just tell yourself from the jump that you're like, no, I'm the Buddha, I accept this. But deep down, you're like, yeah, and I fucking hate that guy, and I hope he flies off a cliff. You're still going to have that anger that's going to affect you. First, you got to let it come through, because it sounds like you had your breakthrough after you were already, pounding your fist in rage. And then you were like, wait a minute, what if I saw it this way? Powerful thing. When we try to suppress anything, it changes the process. It keeps us from the ultimate expression. We always need to be expressing ourselves. So sometimes it's through anger, and we let it out. And then sometimes after anger, you get a lot of clarity, right? Another reason why anger is valuable. Let's say you're really pissed off, and then you go to the gym and you have an amazing workout. And then afterward, you have that great post-workout clarity where you're like, man, this really is unfortunate this happened, but now I have a clearer sense of what I want to do, focus my energy on, and where I want to go. it also allows us to see your experience, Caleb, reminds me that we get really attached to physical things. We're not supposed to lose money. We're not supposed to have setbacks. We're not supposed to feel sad or have losses. Who says? Right? Like, we think it's good to get money, it's bad to lose it. Well, sometimes losing money is the best thing that can ever happen to you, because it gives you a totally different experience that you weren't planning on, right? But that takes you into a greater understanding. And we have to remember that at a soul level, our soul knows nothing about these things. All it cares about is your growth. And growth doesn't just happen on sunny, beautiful days, right? And by positive, accelerating, fortunate experiences. So again, I brought you nothing but blessings is the idea of everything we encounter is for our highest good.
Tough pill to swallow, but the more I think we can endeavor towards that is super important. I think there's also another caveat that I should bring into this, is that at this point in my life a year ago, I also built a lot of time and space as a buffer for when things happened. I'd already been building that. I know, you talk about a lot with like just stress management. Like, do you have space before you react? And cultivating that, which sounds boring for most people. But I look at my past when I would have lit off and probably, found myself justified, self-righteous way of being okay with it. It's always that was in times of chaos around me, or it was burnout lifestyle, just like all on all the time, 1,000% in, all or nothing, burn the ships, let's go. And the shift in life of making space and cultivating that, and I think a lot of people don't consider the importance of building that's essentially, let's call it a spiritual savings account, and don't give a credit to for when bad things don't happen. Like, okay, an unfortunate moment happened, money can come and go, you just gotta mention that, but that could have been a bad thing potentially. Who knows what it could have turned into. And I'm making that one moment a bit extreme, but I think that's why this type of work that you're discussing with learning some of these practices we brought up already is so powerful. Just making time and space is so important. So I appreciate your entire like kind of like your flow through that, because I think still people bring it back to shame and guilt thing. It's like, oh, I experienced a feeling, and now I have to feel guilty about experiencing a feeling, where that gets into like a weird, almost hierarchical, judgmental, spiritual, like I'm better than you, or this is just where I'm on my journey and I feel the thing. I'm growing. Like there's no winning. It's just like I'm getting better. That's winning. I think there's so much of that in lots of these spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you said, it's a hard pill to swallow. In our moments, we don't want to think about the fact like, oh, great, good. I'm so grateful for this because it's helping me learn and grow. We're like, this is uncomfortable. This is hard. That's been my big thing this year, is when I felt these bouts of anger, it's like, this is so uncomfortable and it's so much to process and I'm exhausted from it. Right. I'd prefer not to be going through this, but just as you spoke to, things happen, right? We become angry because we were in a difficult situation and we did things that maybe we regret or felt bad about, and it resulted in conflict or whatever. And we have to sit with it and we have to, explore it a little bit, not to death, right? I mean, I think that also is what people tend to do, is we tend to want to dissect things and go over and over it. I think that we need to reflect to some degree, but we don't want to stew and stay stuck in something, right? Yeah. But again, shame and guilt and regret, to hold on to interminably is not good for us, and it's not helpful, and it does keep us, down. And what just came to me was like having the same grace for ourselves that we do for others, right? It's just understanding that, okay, I did it and it happened and I don't feel great about it, but can I find a way to forgive? Can I find a way to say, because here's the biggest thing. And this was something that I learned, when I was in the 12-step programs, is if we can't make something right? Like, let's say we have a wrong that happened, we can't make it right. we can make, they call it in the groups that living amends, like live your life in a way that is showing that you are making different choices now, that showing that you don't care for the way you act in the past. You recognize that I don't feel like that's a reflection of me. I don't feel proud of that. I feel shame, but I'm going to, rather than stay stuck. And just as you said that, because those are low energies, and it's not helping any of us on this planet for anybody to be in the lower energies for long times. We're all going to like dip down there. We all have shitty days. We all have the bad times, but we all want to be ultimately rising up out of it so that we can all be moving forward. If we're all stuck in low energies, we're all going to be stuck in general. So we have that grace for ourselves to say, you know, I can have the space to acknowledge where I was, and I can make a different choice. Right. I actually woke up that way this morning, where I was kind of down on myself about some things that have happened. I thought, you know what, then I'm going to make today good. I'm going to make some positive choices. I'm going to live the way that feels aligned with my integrity, because before I didn't feel good about this conversation I had, whatever happened. That's the most we can do, because again, you can't change the past. And one other thing I'll also throw out there, because I was told this, and I think this is helpful, is that sometimes we have to go through who we're not to realize who we are. And I think that ties into guilt and regret, is we say, well, how could I have done this? How could this have happened? And it's like, well, how would you know that that doesn't feel like you unless you dipped into it and said, whoa, 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 that's not me. That's not who I am. Now I know better who I am because I went into that place that didn't feel right. And then we can release that guilt and we can bless it, right? And we can say, thank you. Thank you for taking that detour. Thank you for realizing that. I released the shame and guilt around it because it was a great lesson. I feel I've learned the lesson. Moving forward, not going to repeat it.
Yeah, I like that. That brings that practicality back to it. Oh, okay. Who am I not? It's kind of like, let me push into something, and then I'll back off. And that's the space. I think that's a spiritual growth, when you give it the space to see it for what it truly is, to become the observer essentially of your own life. Let's pivot for a minute. We've gone pretty deep. We've gone pretty heavy right now. Let's have a little light, fun question for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
So this is one of my 3 fun questions I've been working on. What sports or creative endeavors, so some people say like, oh, I was an actor or things like that when I was younger. What sports did you play, or creative endeavors did you play in or engage in when you were younger? And also, how did you play them?
Interesting. Okay.
What was your style? What was your style? What was your style? That's
yeah.
kind of
Yeah. So I danced most of my life. My mom was actually a professional ballerina. And so I was enrolled in ballet classes early on. What style did I like? I didn't like ballet because it was too rigid for me. It was too precise. And I realized that I loved hip hop and jazz and stuff where I could kind of add my own spice to it and go really all out. And then I developed a love for like rock music, because I realized I just like to rock the fuck out. Honestly, I like to go to concerts and get crazy. Like that's my style, is just to, you know, just be headbanging and dancing and all that stuff. So yeah, dance was my thing. I played a few sports, and I love them. I thought it was fun. I can get pretty competitive and intense. But in terms of dance, like what was my, like, you said, what was my approach to it? Or like, what did you ask?
What was your style? Like a style?
What was your style?
Yeah. Like,
okay.
So like with some people with sport, they're like, well, some are like, I was the goalie and this is how I thought about things. And some people are like, I played lots of different sports because of blah, 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 blah. Or I liked solo sports, or it was a team sport. Like I'm curious about that lens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I definitely I like dance because I did do a dance team, but I liked that it was more of an individual thing, where I just got to freely express what I was doing. And I did dance classes, but I always got a little bored with like learning the routines. I just wanted to be able to just bust out some moves and basically freestyle. And so that's freestyle is basically my essence. And there's definitely a theme for that for me, which is which shows me that probably my work in this lifetime is to work more with others and to be more part of a group, because my innateness is like, I just want to be on my own and I want to be able to be free and independent and all that. And there's a time and place for that, right? We're talking about being the vagabond and all that. That's beautiful. However, there's also value in community and building roots. So we spoke to the value of being a butterfly or a nomad, right? Which is that you're not identifying too closely with other people. However, the extreme of that is you're not connecting with anybody and you're thinking that you just want to go it alone and not ever, sort of stay put long enough to attend to something, to nourish something, to let it grow. And that's what I'm coming up against is I still feel a call to travel. So I will, but I do believe in the value of setting roots. And I think that a lot of people, when they do settle down, people do it for different reasons, but it's because you've recognized that you feel, I almost feel like when we're at a time of more movement, we're kind of gatherers, right? We're out there, we're gathering information, inspiration, different people, different places. But once we've gathered what we need, we want to kind of nest somewhere and say, well, now I want to take some of these things, some of these seeds that I've gathered and plant them and see what comes forth and then bring a rich life. And I hope that my soul is ready at some point because it feels pretty restless still. But to do that, because it's a beautiful thing when you attend to and honor a space and make something your home, right?
I love your answer because you essentially brought out the question.
The second question?
Well, it was like a 1A, 1B situation because it leads to, hey, so how's that really played out in your life? And you so eloquently started to be like, well, I see this, maybe this is like my soul's calling, learning how to do this. But even in all of your work, and it sounds like, okay, like let's call it psychology or therapy. It's like, the process, but I need to flex. I need to make it my style. It needs to connect on something different. It can't just be in the box. It has to be individualized. And I like how you showed the value of both the vagabond and the kind of the one setting roots, the vagabond and the roots. I think there's a lot of power that you and I think, identify closer to the vagabond style. It's in the past year. I think maybe I've shared this with you, is what I realized with my wife that I wasn't fully giving myself over to her because I saw her more as like the cage that was going to trap this freebird energy that I'm like, this is my essence of my creativity and this is all blah, blah, blah. But I think what you brought there is that once you kind of find some place to place roots, if you're really properly aligned, it's part of with what you're looking for. The people that you connect with, they're not a restraint. They're actually more of a channel to amplify your creative energy because they account for, we'll not say the weaknesses, but the areas where they're not your strengths. And that actually allows your energy to blossom even more fruitfully because it's the right ecosystem for that to flourish. And so I thought it was really cool how you took us on that little journey from your dance to that.
Yeah, I didn't plan it. It just happened. I'm glad I got to share that because I think that's important for people to hear. Because again, I do in my work and everything, I try to, there's always two sides to every coin, every view. And there is, a validation in the physical realm and the spiritual realm, and both are equally important. Right.
Yeah. Let's jump into question number 2. Let's keep the fun stuff rolling around. What? Question number 2. What is your desert island movie or show? I've added show to this one. So essentially you have one show or one show series or one movie for the rest of your life on a desert island that you can play it as many times as you want. You don't have to watch it like every day. You can watch it, but that's the only one you get to watch. What piece of entertainment is that?
So I already know off the top of my head, it's my go-to for almost every question. But when you put it in the desert islands, context, it doesn't seem as appropriate, but Jurassic Park is my favorite movie of all time. I could watch that movie all day, every day. I would still be amazed by that T-Rex scene. And I just love it. Love that movie. The characters. But I feel like if I was on a desert island, it would just make me scared. Not that there might be dinosaurs, but that there's shit out there that could attack me and hurt me. Yeah, that would be it. It always is engaging and exciting. And I just think it's a fine film. It's not like the spiritual or drama, surprisingly, but I just love it.
Is it because it's not the spiritual, the drama that attracts it to you?
I think it's really just because I was in 3rd grade when that movie came out. And I remember going to the theater and we were 3rd row, and I've been obsessed with candy my whole life. Like I'm such a sweets person. And all I cared about was that I got my Skittles and I was going to the movie. But that was the first movie in my life where I didn't even touch my candy. I was so engaged. And I just didn't stop talking about that movie for years. And I still have. So there was just something magical about it. I think we all who grew up in the 90s have that a bit of nostalgia where things felt like this specific, beautiful time. And yeah, I don't know. I just love it. And it just always is, again, it's always like engaging. And I think it's just a fine piece of cinematic history. And I love dinosaurs.
Who doesn't love that? What's your favorite dinosaur?
Right. Somebody asked me this the other day and my friends had a debate. I know that they're kind of punks, but I just like velociraptors. I think they're kind of cool. They just have like this like attitude to them, you know? They're not very nice. But I've heard that in reality, they were really small, actually. They're not like these big guys that they showed in the movie. You've seen that movie, right? You've seen Jurassic Park?
I've seen Jurassic Park. Come on.
And the scene where they're stuck in that kitchen and the T-Rexes come in, like, come on, that's just like the what's the word? Suspense. Oh man.
One of my favorite parts about the movie question, I'm a big movie buff. I love it. So from a nostalgia, I don't know if I've shared this on the show yet. The movie question has come from like one of my actually all three questions have some deep roots into this. So my father growing up worked a lot and was travel a lot because he's you see that picture in the background right there? We built that. We actually built that together. So
what is it?
It's
like a mountain range. Is there a mountain range in that picture?
Yep, it's inspired by his trip to Alaska. So that art form is called marquetry. Basically, all that stuff there is thin veneer pieces of wood, but laid in like a jigsaw puzzle. But he drew it and they laser and all that stuff. Anyway, he's been selling art for his whole life, his art. And anyway, when the beautiful thing around growing up, like I always knew I had a very loving family. Always knew he cared about me. And one of the ways that he did such an amazing job with that, he taught me a true lesson in being present. At least once a month, maybe every 6 weeks, I kind of maybe sometimes it blends together, but we would always go on like a boys' night dinner. So he would take me to Sports Authority and then we'd go get a bite to eat and we see a movie. It was always like Sports Authority, then Outback, because Outback was the thing then. Now Outback is so. They need to step their game up and get back to like the olden days. It was like the thing. And then we go catch a movie. And that was kind of like our bonding time. And it was like he's shared now, like I'm older. He's like, yeah, you don't know the kind of stresses I was going through and all the like things, crippling anxiety. And he was running a business. Like, so I'm like, I have an understanding of what that feels like. But put a gun to my head, I would have never known it. He was so present. And I felt like I don't need a lot of like extra TLC every single day. Like, I don't need somebody doting over me with all my little things. Like somebody could send me a text once a year and I'm like, okay, cool. Like we're good. I work very hard to make sure I message people because it's not my like normal operating thing, but I know people value it. So you can already see where I'm going with like, here's the sports thing, athletics. And I think there's a lot of interesting things about how we play. I've been thinking a lot about why play is such a powerful and beautiful thing that we have abandoned as adults. We don't see the value in it. Desert Island Movement, like this entertainment. How do we engage? How do we tell stories? What do we care about with stories? And we'll get to the final one in a second. But that was one of. It was so interesting to see how it's just a simple gesture of making some time. Hi, dude, what's the deal? He wants to let his opinion. I was like, what about Lassie? Like that'd be my Desert Island show. I think I'm sharing. I didn't anticipate sharing this today, but like it's clearly stuck so much with me about the value of making a time to be very focused with somebody and push all the other shit aside. And like we could have done without the food, we could have done with the movie, but it was the intentionality of, hi son, we're bonding, we're here. Work's not here with me right now. I'm with you. I think That's interesting how I've landed on a couple of these. You'll see why the third one is meaningful in a second too. So,
Yeah. Wait,
um,
but first I have to pause you and say on that note, with these meaningful interactions with your dad, and that has to hold a big space in your heart. Because isn't it amazing that when we're young, the person that I know my parents to be now is, I just thought my parents were my parent. They're essentially our creators. You think they know everything, they have everything together, that they're just like this messiah that's just there to, we got mad at them, right, as kids, and we didn't realize, like, just as you said, that your dad was like, oh, I was out of my mind with stress and all this. And you're like, what? But you were dad. You were there always, taking care and making these things happen. So that's really amazing. With those specific memories, is there a movie that sticks out that you two saw together that you've kind of held in your heart or wherever that kind of holds a special place?
there's not, ironically, maybe one of them is Starship Trooper, but I think it's because it was one of like the first rated R movies he took like that I got to go to, and I was like, I think I was like 12 or 13, so I felt like I was part of like the cool kids. Not a great flick. I mean, it was like garbage
I love
sci-fi.
that movie with the crazy alien bugs and like, yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's fun.
it was a lot. I mean, it's fun, but like you look back now and you're like, okay. I mean, it was like also like nudity and there's boobs and there's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, like
You're like,
I'm
what's happening?
you're like, what's going on? Like, I can't talk about this. And like there was a swear word, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on now? So like that, my dad's big into rites of passage, and which I think has completely been thrown by the wayside. There is not, I think that that's some of the values still in like the traditional religions that still in some essence try to keep it around, but I think it's been turned into these, they're more just kind of checking the boxes as opposed to the depth of what's supposed to be, like whether it's confirmations or is it bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. Like I think there's I think there's such a disconnect from what is being supposed to be done through that. It's, and I think that the sacrifice, like the trials that somebody is supposed to go through until you're open to the truth of like, hey, you're now shepherded into adulthood. You get to now be exposed to the real, or at least the next level of real information, whether it's like, okay, you can hear swear words, or, you're going to be privy to information that beforehand we did not trust your child mind to hear this. And now I'm going to cultivate this other mature side because I'm essentially getting you ready to be gone from the nest. That I think he did a great job, at least with me. He put me through some interesting moments where we just like, whether it was fishing trips or some other things, like it was, hey son, we're going to go talk about some stuff. Not super frequent, but like they were moments. Yeah. So that one comes to mind that we probably saw. I couldn't even tell you how many movies at this point. It's not my desert island movie at all, but that being the desert. So I'll give you the two answers of what my desert island shows are, or things are. Show is Ted Lasso, hands down, and movie is Wedding Crashers, because I just think they are hilarious, and the physical mannerisms and just like the way they say it's a couple. I laugh at the same spots every single time. And it's just like silly too at the same time. So,
and it's a feel good movie. And that's what you might want on a desert island, something that brings up your spirits.
Exactly. Did you have any like traditions or anything like that when you're younger? You have rites of passage kind of things, or like?
Yeah, no. I think that's what's maybe even led me to be such a seeker, is that I feel like there wasn't much, I wasn't really guided in terms of like, here's what we're doing and this is what will happen now. And it was just where I felt like I was just kind of thrown in there. My parents met under interesting circumstances. They were both under their own stress. And I felt like everybody in my family was very distracted and we didn't always feel like a real unit. It's amazing that a family can live together, but not really be a family. They can just be people sharing space. That adults and parents, as we now know, as we get older, that it doesn't mean that they know the answers to everything, that they're also just human beings who got pregnant and had kids sometimes. And so I just felt like there was no structure except for maybe like birthdays, right? Like the typical things you're supposed to do. But I didn't ever feel that sense of like, hey, like, you're getting to be 13. How do you feel about this or that? Or like, you're going to be a teenager now. Like, let's talk about this or that. Like, there wasn't any of those acknowledgments or conversations. And I do also, that harkens back more to when we used to live more in villages, right? Where people were more communal, and they would recognize milestones and times in life together. And so it was spoken of and shared openly. Right. And that's, I think that's powerful, because when we don't see the value of those things, we kind of lose a sense of appreciation or value for our life. But also, like you said, like, we don't really know where certain things start and things end, right? Like, well, I'm still a child, but now I'm having these different feelings and I'm curious about different things. What's that about? Right. And sex ed class doesn't always like do the job to explain it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't. And because I didn't have it. We didn't have a religious presence in our family, which I was grateful for on one hand, because I didn't align with it. Even as a kid, I was like, what? This doesn't feel right to me. But it was almost like not enough structure, right? We're just kind of thrown in this world. We want a little bit of guidelines about what the heck is going on here,
Isn't that weird? So in my coaching, I call it structured flexibility, and that you have to have, some boundary, but it's got to bend, and you have to, and like in the beginning, it's a little more rigid, and then you soften and you soften, but like it's about testing your boundaries. I'd be curious if you think so, but I think there's a calling for that. I think the tribalism we are seeing in social media, the perceived vast divide, which once you actually start talking to people, you realize most people are actually kind of on the same page. It's like 10% of people on each other's side. The 80% in the middle are like, yeah, I agree with you on most things. We're all good. Like, I think that there's a calling for what is our united identity? What is our united cause? What do we really all care about? And I do think part of the problem of this loss of shepherding into adulthood, and we're trying to manufacture it in weird ways in schools, was like, we don't trust our institutions for some pretty obvious reasons. There was some lack of integrity and some failure to some exposing of some unfortunate things. And it's sad because there's and you're talking to a guy who grew up in a cult, so it's like, I look back now, I'm like, there was a lot of value in the things, but if there had it's always like if there was just this, like a space for curiosity, and like a coaxing of that to really engage. And I think there's a lot of this adaptive type of learning nowadays that's being more pushed. My wife being in education, that I think is making space for that. I know it's going to be a little bit, but I do think there's so many people. I asked that question, who are you? Because I know I was asked that question that way. That blew my mind when I was in 5th grade. Like, how many other people don't even get asked that question their entire life? And they're just lost. They're just chasing their own tail. There is some value in how do we take us through a process that is, of course, then now you're putting a standard on it. It's like, and who's deciding what the standard is? That's a unique thing. But there is a calling. There is a what does maturation look like in this modern world?
Yeah. And we're at an interesting time again in human evolution, because so far when we've tried to do that, we end up with cults and, these dogmatic religions that don't, because just as you said, they don't allow. What always seems to happen thus far is, because most cults and religion starts at the basis of very wonderful ideas, right? Like, wow, those are great. There's not one cult you can find that doesn't have a few really great bangers, right? Like, you're on it. That's great. That's helpful. Most people who went through any form of cult found it very helpful and changed positively at first, until that sort of, whatever you want to call it, the hook came in and said, but wait a minute, here's the catch. We're actually now telling you who you are and what you have to keep doing and how you have to live your life from now on if you want to stay within this. That's the issue. You can't beholden somebody to a belief system that you've created. It's kind of the thought that just came to me is, it's like art. When you offer people a way of thinking, you have to let them interpret it themselves and take it how they take it. You can't force someone, if you draw a picture, to be like, no, this was my intention behind the picture, behind a movie. I've heard so many filmmakers interviewed and they said, yeah, I created this movie with this whole messaging behind it and nobody got it, but they got this other message and I was shocked, but it's great, right? That's their interpretation of my art. Well, the same as if we can do more of that with ideas around, creating some structure, but then saying like, step into it, but have, your own sort of interpretation and then take it into your own way, rather than saying, okay, now I've created this, so now you will adhere to it and adhere to me, which again is where we see cults and cult leaders. And that never ends well. If there's a documentary out right now on Netflix about how to become a cult leader, which is trying to be tongue in cheek, but it's going through all the different cults from the past, 100 years. And they're saying like these were their primary motives, but that's not all people. There's always going to be some people that just want to be megalomaniacs and rule the world. But others of us, I think there are more of us who genuinely, we're all caught up in our ego. We're human beings. We have an ego. It has a purpose, but just like anger, it can be blown out of proportion. But there's more of us that are being called to, just as you said, to ask those fundamental questions that for some reason we've decided to stop asking. We ask a lot of questions, right? How can I make a lot of money? How can I get this? How can we do this? But we don't ask, who are we? What are we doing here? What's our goal here? We just keep going and going and going. And we've literally never stopped to ask collectively, because you pointed that out, Caleb. That's the key point. We individually have these existential experiences, but we haven't yet had a collective existential ability to say, what do we want to do? Which is a powerful thing when we realize that in all the stretches of everybody on the planet, we have that thing in common, which is that we are all here together, whether you like it or not, whether you and I think very differently, or that culture feels so alien or different from us, we're still all here having a collective experience of being present on earth. So what do we want to do with that? And we refuse to ask it because we have so many divisions and we feel so separate from, but I think that we're moving towards that. And I think, unfortunately, just like we're talking about, some of the worst things that happen to us, tend to be a blessing. We're reaching like the pinnacle point of divisiveness, right? I mean, violence, war, separation has been a part of our, species history since the beginning. However, we have more technology, we have more means of communication. So it's like really fired up now. You know what I'm saying? But once we reach a point of realizing that all the arguing and fighting in the world is not going to resolve it, we're going to naturally kind of come back to this. We're going to all find ourselves on our knees saying, what now? What are we going to do? That's what I believe. Maybe it doesn't have to be that dramatic. I'm hoping that it shifts in a more natural way towards like more resolution, to trying to understand one another. We spoke about the importance of understanding earlier. Talk about the importance of understanding. When we can understand people from different walks of life on our planet, then we can realize we're all in this together. But right now, most of us don't feel that way.
What you brought up there, even used the word alien in there. It's like all the talk and that nobody really apparently is paying attention to, or at least some people will say nobody's paying attention. Then you'd hear be like, no, why is nobody talking about this? People are talking about it. With the alien stuff going on with Congress right now. I thought about this the other day, is that we have this perception that we're so far away from each other. And I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. I was like, if we're going to become an interplanetary species, what would like Mars be about? And we talk about like, let's even bring it to like language. What would the universal language, what would be the universal message from Earth to whatever's on Mars? And it's perhaps like we need to see how actually closer together we are, that it's just that there's this perception. We feel like it's just my house or my town or my city or my state or my country, and we don't realize like, no, it's our world.
Yeah.
And if we were to travel to another planet, what would be the message? How would you think of the culture of planet Earth? The same way we think of like, okay, we're here in the United States, we have this kind of culture. People are like, that all Americans are this. Or then you go to France and like, oh, all French people are this. Or you go to China, all Chinese people. Or you go to all this. Or you go to Australia, they're all like, Well, what if we said like, oh, you go to the world, they're all this? That'd be, I don't know why I thought about that the other day, but like if we zoomed out that far to think about what's that culture, what's the one thing that it seems like we do, and we focus purely on that, I think we'd find a lot more peace. And I think we realize like we both inherently actually believe we're all trying to solve the same problem. We're just not aware of it. It actually needs to reveal itself from the pressure. And that's, who the hell knows what's going to take to do that. But like if we took all the veils off, and it's kind of like how you saw behind the curtain, like, oh, it's just some dude on a thing pushing the buttons. Like, oh, the mystery's gone. We all be like, oh, we are really saying the same thing. What would we think then? I think there's a lot of shame and guilt of like, so I said those things to you, but you were really trying to do the same thing as me. We just maybe kind of had a slightly different way of going about it. Huh. Oh, I don't know. Ooh, I don't feel so good about that. And that's perhaps why we perpetuate it. Cause like, if I'm more right about the end solution, then it justifies all my shitty behaviors along the way. I don't know.
Yes. Well, that analogy just perfectly encapsulates exactly what we've been talking about, which is that, because it's true, it's absolutely true. If we were at the position where we needed an ambassador for Earth who had a single message from Earth, what would it be? How could we know that? We've never once stopped to connect as, the human species to ask that. We have people who have decided that they are the ones who will determine things. And most people feel separate from, right? I think that's one reason why we don't feel like a collective, is because a lot of people feel disenfranchised, disempowered. And they're like, whatever, I don't let the government do it. Let other people tell me, I don't care anymore. Say what you want to. I think that's why people don't care that much. They're like, whatever, we have enough problems here. If there's aliens, great. If there's not, like, you take care of it. But you're totally right that what would we say? We are, and that's, but it's also a reason to get excited about Earth, because I really believe in the potential for humanity. I mean, if you take a step back, first of all, I'll mention that I really love aliens. I'm totally into the whole alien thing. I think people didn't freak out because we've all known that aliens existed. At least I did. Most of us were like, come on now, you're just leaking this information now. For what reason? You have a reason, but we know darn well that aliens have been here. We know all this. That's how I feel. But when you think about, I go into like alien, stories and different ideas about it, but that other species of aliens are not like humans. That's what I've come across in my different explorations and readings of different people who, have these channelings or whatever from beings from other planets. Maybe I'm getting too out there, but I don't really care. The idea is that aliens are very different from us. I heard once that some aliens are fascinated with us because other species don't have emotions. We have our idea of aliens are kind of a uniform creatures, right? Well, think about the fact that human beings, we all look different. We all have, and maybe that's why we're so caught up in ego and our appearances, because it's like a beautiful thing. Like we have our own looks and our own assets, and other species are kind of like animals where it's like they're all just sort of uniform looking. So I heard that once, that like they're fascinated with us because they don't have the range of emotions we do. They don't look different. So there's not this sort of battle for like who's the best and who's the most attractive. We're very unique species, but it makes it very difficult. So you can almost, it's like, yes, life is easier when you're uniform, but it's more interesting and, heightened experience when you have the variabilities that we do as a human species. So with that said, if you look at the potential for humanity, we also have all different unique passions and gifts and abilities. Can you imagine what our world would be like if instead of fighting, we just all came to the table with what we had and we're like, what should we do with this? And then I think about, sorry, I'm getting into it now, but I'm just going to keep going.
Please go. I love this.
Like if you think that we are a part of a galaxy, of a solar system, of a giant universe, and that every single thing that exists is different in its own way, then Earth itself is meant to shine its own unique light, and we get to decide what light that is. I think right now we're not fully shining our light, and that's why we're left alone. I've also heard that theory too, is that aliens don't come to us because we're like the backwater planet. People are like, we're not going to go there. That place is That place is a mess. Well, that it's lower energy, right? Just as you spoke of, we're all more so in the lower energy emotions, anger, hate, violence, greed, right? So, but if we can shift that, humanity has such potential. And we've been around for a while, but not that long. And we could have the best days ahead of us. It's up to us what we're going to do, what we're going to make humanity into, which brings back your example of, what if people reached out to us for some guidance? What if people wanted to hang out with humanity because we were great rather than avoid us like aliens do now? So I think about this stuff a lot. I appreciate you bringing it up. But I think that, if we could pause and start to ask that question, it would change everything. But again, we've decided that life is not about that. Life isn't about like exploring who we are and why we're here. It's about getting really busy to hang on to what we've established, which is, to create innovations and profit and gathering, producing, accumulating more and more stuff and things and power and all this stuff, which is a dead end. That's like a building like the world's tallest building that's eventually going to fall over. Our society will collapse if we keep going how it's going. We're already seeing it. We're seeing the beginning stages of the ultimate collapse.
Yeah. Well, you used a very powerful word before, is that we decide. Individually, we have to all uniquely decide. And I think that's where the real fear lies, because whether it's your healing process or collaborative process, whatever, it comes down to an individual choice. And so many people are afraid to be uniquely responsible for their decisions. And I think because sometimes it means like, I will then separate myself from the crowd. Do I not feel as safe? Do I not feel as protected, or whatever that is? And it's easy to keep people in fear, and the fear leads to all the other, the shenanigans that you've just mentioned before. So yeah, I think it takes optimists like yourself to say, hey guys, yeah, got it. It's a little terrifying, but what's the alternative? Like, clearly it's going this way. Clearly the way we've been doing it ain't solving the problem. Mm-hmm. Maybe this other way might just work out. Historically it shows that way. But
absolutely. And that comes back to the heart of my work, which is why I think I was sort of inspired with focusing on the divine feminine. Is, to me, that's the missing part, that the value of ourselves and of our eternal soul is missing from this planet. And if we can introduce that and allow for that in our systems, in our interactions, in our lifestyle, that we'll see a shift in our values, our priorities, on how our behaviors, right? Because introducing more of those ideas, I use the analogy of, it's like introducing cold water to like scalding hot water. Because right now, a lot of what we see is very scalding hot, angry, fired up, like I said before. But if we can get some of that cooler water that allows us to soften a bit, and because again, softening allows for understanding, we connect more. Then we have this mix, and we have a new experience, understanding of what it means to be human and what we're doing with our time here. But without that introduction, we're still just going on fumes, just pushing, grinding for what? For what we think is the meaning of life, which is achievement, being impressive.
Well, I like what you just brought there. You brought back the divine feminine. I forgot to tap into it earlier, but I think about a divine feminine as more of a grounding energy. And then why I say that is like the Mother Earth. It's the earth. It grounds the creative energy, which I think a lot more like a dominant kind of a masculine energy. It's that and I think what people keep getting fucked up is masculine, feminine. It's not bad or good, better or worse. You need both. You need the nourishing soil, but you also need the seed. You need the water. You need the work. You need the work, but you need the space to hold the damn thing. They both need to be there. There needs to be the discipline and accountability, and there needs to be the acceptance. And it's so like the fear-based stuff is like, people make it binary. It's like either or. Like, great, you just created two camps again, all over again. What? I like that you brought that out. For the record,
absolutely.
So go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was basically going to say you're fucking awesome, but
I think we're awesome because we've been going at this this is impressive. This is, I mean, this is a record for me. I don't know. Do you usually have podcasts this long?
I've actually had them mostly like an hour and 15 lately. So I've done a couple 3-hour episodes. So
Dang.
yeah, I
Are
can
you the
stop.
next Joe Rogan? You're just going to do the long form?
If I
You
would,
covered. This is a great conversation. You're easy to
I
talk to.
thank you. It means a lot. I, at great risk of sounding egotistical, I believe I have the ability to hold space like that. I listen to his podcast all the time, and I study how he does it. He's very thoughtful. I think he does not get enough credit for how good he is at what he does. Um, I remember one episode where I heard him. He's like, my commentating, my comedy, and my podcast, they all feed each other. They all improve each other. And I think of most people don't know this, but I think of like anybody who ever wants to know how I work, my coaching style is very much like this podcast. This is what it kind of feels like. I'm gonna push a little bit. I'm gonna challenge. I'm gonna summarize some things. I'm gonna push things back. Blah, blah, blah. I think the most important thing I've learned about hosting a podcast and reminded is make people feel safe, show them love and appreciation, and be curious. And I've learned everybody has a beautiful story to share. And the longer you can sit in that beautiful story with them, like I've heard you go down a couple paths today. Like, I don't know if she's ever gone down that path before, but like, I like that because I feel like I feel like we're co-creating experience. And it feels nice for me because I don't feel like I need to take credit for it. And I have like a joy of just like watching you be in your element. That gives me joy as a person to be like, yo, she's fucking saying some cool shit right now. Like I told you about when I'm going to edit this thing, like later on, that one passage, there was like 7 mic drop things you said in like a 2-minute clip. And I'm like, I gotta sit back and listen to that one again. That's like fun for me because I feel like I'll say it this way. A few years ago, I realized I didn't know what I thought was fun. I didn't know how to have fun. I didn't know how to play. And I struggle with free form play personally. I do very well. You put me in a structure and it's a game, I will learn how to win. Love it. Then I get very bored. My idea of fun is typically to go walk in somebody's life and like hear their stories and to receive their thought process. Like, what do you enjoy? When in Rome, like take me to where the cool things are and I will see the world like what did you enjoy as a child, what did you enjoy, what did you like to do, and I'll experience like a little a la carte kind of style of what you did, but that's your highlight reel. I like to feel like I'm a part of that. So sitting here, like selfishly, I just get to learn cool shit and get little tastes of your life in a playful way. So like from listening to Rogan stuff, like yeah, I've taken a lot of that. If I'm ever the next Rogan, cool. I'd rather be like the first Caleb Nelson and that be that, but like my
There
own
you go.
style. But I think
There
he's
you go.
I
And
think
you
he's
already are. You already
thank,
are the first Caleb Nelson.
thank you. But I think a lot of people could learn something from the fact that he sits in a potentially very uncomfortable space for a long period of time. Just doing that and listening to people talk about things you might not agree with is important. That's it. Like that's to me is like 99% of the world's problems would be if we just do that. And we could like learn how to try to be civil in that and see the world through somebody else's eyes. How are you going to do that in a 40-second clip? You're just not. That's not interesting. That's not interesting at all. And I don't think it challenges the recipient, the host of the information to grow. And I don't think it makes you better as a provider or a host of information for others if you don't allow yourself that type of thing. So it's basically a long way of complimenting Joe Rogan for influencing me on that. So, and I take it in high regard that you would even think of me in the same breath. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Did we
With
have
that,
a third question? Did we hit the third question?
I was just going to ask you the third question. What is your deathbed meal and who are you sharing it with?
Oh, whoa. Okay. Big question.
Super light, right? I know.
Oh man. Okay. So first off, one of my favorite things to do is to have bed picnics where you just like, actually, especially on Friday nights, maybe that's what I'll do tonight, is when you just like get a whole spread of all your favorite things. You're going from like little appetizers to like some main course things to, you know, desserts, and you just put it all out there as a picnic and put on an awesome movie, probably Jurassic Park or Star Troopers, and then Stormtrooper. What, Star Troopers? What was it?
Starship Troopers, yeah.
Starship Troopers.
Aliens,
And
there we go.
then you just watch it and get to enjoy. And like maybe you have like a bite of dessert and then like you're having a bite of your, basically like a buffet type thing. And that's my favorite. So there'd be some sushi involved, there'd be a lot of cake involved, probably some brownies and pie. There would be let's see, like definitely some bread, so maybe like some Italian stuff, some pizza. Basically, I'm saying that my meal would include all the foods. And who would I share it with? I would share it with my soulmate, who I have yet to meet, but I know is also going to absolutely love bed picnics with the whole smorgasbord of different culinary delights.
I like the way you think about food, because I send me to the idea of like a universal buffet of like cuisines, like exotic cuisines from around the world. Line me up. When you come out here, we'll do sushi. We'll do sushi because I love
Nice.
sushi. Yes. Um, that'll be fun. And oh, that was a great answer. That was a great answer. That was
Well,
fun.
talk about joy. I find, you know, I can obviously we both can get into the serious stuff, but when I'm enjoying like good food, I'm just in that and I'm being real in my physical self and just, you know, it's a delightful thing. It's a pleasurable thing. Like eating is awesome. I get very excited about it, right? It's the little things you do. It is important to find joy. Not everything has to always be so serious, right? It's that balance. And I do think a lot of people are like you, where it's like they don't really know how to make time for fun or how to even really engage with that, because what fun is different than what's satisfying, right? Which I also can be competitive, or like I like, if you give me rules, I will fucking like hammer it home and get it done. But you know, is that the same? It can be satisfying, but like joy is just like freedom, right? Like you're just sort of like your childlike self, where it's just like there's no winner, there's no losing, it's just for the sake of enjoyment. And that's what food is to me.
I love that. You see how that came full circle with the father son bonding evening? All three of those
Yeah.
things right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The final question there is my version, or my more, let me change that, my more lighthearted version of a question and a guided meditation I've run. I have, it's called Who's Holding Your Hand on Your Deathbed? And the reason why, one, it makes it a little more playful because I like to think about what people like from food and like what story does it tell and all that. But I I asked the Who's Holding Your Hand on Your Deathbed thing because I believe that person, when I think about that, it wipes out all the other trivial bullshit that's going on in my life. Like, that's the person I need to care about. That's it. It brings me a clarity of focus. Secondarily, what I believe is that we're all each other's mirror. Like, you are my mirror in some way right now. I have thoroughly loved this conversation. I can't wait to meet you in person. Because we're gonna just, I feel like we were destined to be friends. And I believe, especially on our deathbed, like when we look into each, when we look at this person in front of us, like they're showing us something about ourselves, whether it's our potential or whatever. But especially on our deathbed, I believe that person who's looking into your eyes and looking into your soul is the mirror of your, like, the potential you've reached in your lifetime, and they're
Yeah.
showing you that. So when we ask that, you know, I think about my wife on my deathbed, and I believe my wife like believes in my potential, and if I can just live up to that, like, I will have continued to reach, because I think our loved ones, the people, and you brought up soulmates, so I'm like elaborating on this a little bit. I believe that soulmate, that person we choose to share the deepest journey of ourselves with, brings out the best in us, because we can't see what we're capable of. We only know what is in front of us, but our soulmate, our other person, it's like a coach, like they're outside the box. They can see it from an, and like, it's like, no, you have more. and it's them essentially who asks and begs of you to rise to that occasion if they have the courage to be able to do so. Because you also have to be essentially from your soul asking to be challenged to rise to that occasion. So wanted to share a little bit more depth where like that whole question has come from along the journey. So
yeah, absolutely. And, in this lifetime, the most, impactful, pivotal, times of growth are usually in relation. There's a time for both, just like it's kind of like the time for flittering around and traveling and then coming back and building roots. There's a time for solo time for growth where you just have to really be with yourself and reflect and explore what's in there. But our true greatest growth is going to be through another, in relation with another. Because in truth, there is no difference between you and I are two people. We're a part of the same whole, but we're having two different experiences in this lifetime. So we can see we can see ourselves through another. And just as you said, somebody can tell us what they see that maybe we can't see yet. And you also get challenged, right, about your ways or your tendencies that somebody might call you out on. And it might, again, anger comes up, right? And you're like, what? How could you say that? But then you're like, well, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I can gain some understanding about their experience. So yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable thing. And it really creates this bond of you learn how to care about somebody free from any sort of incentive or any tie-in. You just learn to love and appreciate them, which is a powerful thing.
because in an ironic way, it also teaches you how to love and appreciate yourself.
Yes, that's a true partner. That's a real beautiful thing and rare. Unfortunately, a lot of, I think, unfortunately, talking about like the evolution of the human species, I've heard it even said that we don't actually know what love is for the most part, because a lot of our love right now is transactional, two people saying tit for tat. You give me this, I'll give you that. You don't give me this, I'll withhold from you. But I do believe that people now more so are experiencing real love, where it is, even if you have nothing to offer me, I'll still love you. Even if you go your own way, I will still hold love for you in my heart. So I'm hoping that there's more of that happening here, right? Where when that person who's going to hold your hand at your deathbed, you're going to be like, I'm so glad that we had this experience in this world, in this reality for this time, I
want to know what love is.
That song just came on in my car. I love Foreigner.
Oh, that's awesome. Talk about
Want you to show me.
Fun question before
Sure.
we even wrap it up. You want to pull a card right now?
Yeah.
Let's do
I do.
this.
I have to go grab one. Is that
Yeah, it's fine. I've never done this on the show. This is to be fun.
Ooh, all right. Okay.
Woo, yeah. For anybody who is listening right now, I'm not going to edit this space out because sometimes you just sit in space and you transition through life, and it's good for the health. Because if you're still sitting at this point of the show, thank you for being a listener. So I'm just filling dead space while my lovely guest is off looking for some tarot cards. Sometimes sitting and just waiting, it's all we need to do to digest some of those other thoughts that have been brought up. I was just solo riffing. I was just vamp, vamp, vamp.
You got it. Okay. So are we recording again?
Oh, I didn't stop. I just leave it going.
Okay. All right. So because we've spouted so much wisdom, I grabbed my Wisdom of the Oracle deck.
Oh.
They're really fun. They got some cool stuff. Let's see what wants to come out for us.
Pretty hyped.
You ready? Oh, ooh. Oh my God. This one jumped right out.
Hi-oh.
Go the distance. I feel like this is so perfect. This is so beautiful. I'm going to read the description, but the first thing that comes to mind is I feel like, I say when you pull Oracle card, you're getting your higher self is coming in, any spirits that are around you, loved ones that have passed. It's people who are, or essences that are in the spiritual realm that have moved on from the physical experience of humanity. So they know what it's like to be human, but they're like on the other side of it. And they're like, they want to encourage the best for us here. So that's what I think of when I pull cards, is like, you're getting messages from people who, for one, or entities that can see from a higher, like almost like a bird's eye view of what's going on in your life, but also who can have an experience that we can't have here, which is they're not attached to ego anymore, right? So go the distance is like, yes, everything you guys have talked about in this conversation, just do it. Like, you only have this life right now. Like, go for it. Like, don't hold back. That's what I'm getting. It's like, don't hold back. If you have an idea, if you feel inspired in any way to act on these ideas, bringing humanity together, right? Encouraging people to ask this fundamental question of who are we? Just go for it. Like, I think this is a time for that, where people, the more that we have, whatever you want to call it, like trailblazers or what's like renegades and people going, all those things, people going rogue. It's that time. Like, if the only reason you're holding back is because of what other people might think, it's time to let that go and just go the distance, go for it. Right.
I feel like my next song is like, push it to the limit. That was awesome.
Or Cake. Do you know Cake? He's going the distance.
Oh, there we go.
He's going for speed. Remember that song?
Yes, I do. I haven't heard that in ages. That's probably why it didn't really click for me. But that off the rip, yeah, that's awesome.
You got to go listen to that after this. Great song. Okay. So 47, that's also might be an important number for somebody. Go the distance. Essential meaning: endurance, strength, the long haul. To bring your dream to life, you must think long-term and pay no attention to the fluctuations in the current of your experience. Joy and disappointment, this is what we're saying, commingle with opportunities. So there is no need to fear the occasional obstacle. Life is not a sprint. This card is a reminder that you have endurance, strength, and fortitude to carry you all the way. Remain true to yourself. Your authenticity alone will keep you in alignment with the energy of miracles. What is yours will never be withheld from you. Remember that.
I'm so glad I don't know what like clicked in my like, oh, I should ask. Can we do a card? You know what? So I don't, this is probably posted after I'm posting, or I'm going to tell you about what I'm posting. I did my mission and vision of everything, and I'm going to be posting, I think I'm going to post it this weekend, or the weekend before. We're talking about the thing that felt like a very like Back to the Future moment I just had right there. Lots of great.
I'm into it.
And I've been associating entrepreneurism, especially like heart-centered entrepreneurism, where it's about a purpose, a deeper, longer, legacy-driven purpose. Entrepreneurism is an endurance sport that I don't think people, if they started to shift their mind to that, they'd stop doing this crazy crash diet lifestyle, because they realize your body, this vehicle that's housing the spiritual being, ain't gonna make it as long as you need it to. Because endurance is about, can you do the repeated action? And if you don't have joy and love and all the other like nourishing things to be able to keep the cycle going, well, it's going to be a short-lived cycle. But the mission I've been reflecting around, and you brought up something earlier, but I believe the problem, we talked about this, I believe, in a previous kind of conversation, is that I believe we're in a spiritual health crisis. We're shifting in our society from the place of scarcity, survival, to thriving abundance. We don't know how to handle that. We're slipping. We've risen into this place societally, though it sometimes doesn't feel that way in certain areas of the world, that we're stepping into self-actualization, the final climb, and essentially the realization of what is our true potential, but on a global scale, which lends itself everything into what we just talked about. Who are we, and what is our united vision as a humanity, which is hard. And what we need to be able to get towards those things is what I believe is generational health, the ultimate in endurance. And health is, I think, people are like, oh, it's like, cool, you're in shape and you got abs. Like, yeah, that's kind of a symbol, maybe. Like, there's plenty of people I know with six-pack abs that feel like garbage, and I've been one of those people. But like that physical, mental, emotional, relational, financial, spiritual health, it is all of those things, this holistic model. So many people keep such a narrow box on. It's like, of course, this square peg round hole situation you put yourself into ain't gonna last. We need that. We need that. So when you talk about going the distance, we're running the ultimate marathon that doesn't really end, and it's an endless relay race of endurance races to hand off to the next generation, to build on this understanding we're going through. So I love like the fact that that card came up there and we're talking about this. Like, oh, you've got like I've got tingles in my hands right now. Tingles.
Awesome.
Got me so
And
fired.
that little, that little tinge that told you to tell me to grab the cards was a, little guidance, little intuition on your part.
I got a former client. She calls them uni nods, a little nod from the universe. I think it's the
I
cutest
love
thing.
it.
Denise, if you're listening, love you. You're awesome. You're just fucking awesome. It's really like this has been so much fun. I cannot believe what 2 hours just like flew by as quickly as it did. Whitney, my dear, if anybody's listening right now and they're like, yo, I'm all about this vibe. I need what she's got. I feel like she's the right person to help shepherd me on this part of my journey right now. And they want to connect with you. What's the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Yeah. The easiest way is to find me on Instagram. Is if you find me on Instagram, Women Waken, then you can, if you DM me, then we can connect. And actually what I do is I'll pull a card. I'll pull a few cards for whoever reaches out and messages me on Instagram. Cause I love to, anybody who finds their way to me, it's a reason. And I probably have a message for you and maybe we end up working together, whatever it is, or maybe you just want to riff about Jurassic Park or the potential of humanity. Either are equally important to me. So if you are interested in that, you can find me on Instagram. But I also have my podcast that Caleb will be a guest on in a few weeks. Women Waken. I'm on YouTube. I'm on all the platforms, Spotify, Apple, all the stuff.
Love it. If you all did not get that, don't worry. It will be in the show notes. So you can go check that out. But Women Waken sounds pretty obvious. Like just do that. What final words of wisdom would you like to impart upon the audience today, my dear?
Ooh, I mean, I'm still riding this wave of the go the distance card. It really is. And I truly believe that we are at a time where the more people that step out with their truth is what's going to lead to change. I feel like we're all just waiting for somebody to step forward and say in a prominent way what we've been saying, which is basically, what are we doing and why are we doing it this way? I think a lot of us in our hearts, we feel certain ways and we don't speak to it, but more and more we are. So who's ever listening, the message is to really trust your truth, that even if nobody else agrees with it, that doesn't mean it's wrong. And that if you have a message to share, there's a reason for it. It's needed at this time. And no matter who you are, there is a place for your voice and for your message, especially now. So if this resonates with you, whether it's starting your own podcast or writing a blog, or even just having a conversation with a friend about something that you were hesitant to say, say it, do it. Don't hold back. That's the biggest thing, is don't hold back and trust your truth. Because what's ever true for you, there's a reason where it's coming from. Again, even if it doesn't look like what anybody else is saying right now, that's what we need, is more people who are innovative from a soul level. Just like you said, we're having a spiritual health crisis. That's the biggest one. So if something's coming from your soul's emphasis is always correct. So allow that to come forward and go the distance with it. Yeah.
She's going the distance.
Going for speed. All alone. Such a good song. Such a good pump up song, right? Like if you want to get revved up for your day or like your workout, feel motivated to just like get out in the world. And yeah, it's a good one.
You're awesome. This has been an incredible conversation. I am so grateful for the powers that be for bringing you into my life. I'm excited to see where our friendship grows to. I'm excited to see you soon. Well, excited to be on the podcast. Excited to see you in person soon. And yeah, it's going to be a beautiful journey ahead. Thank you so much for being part of this. Everybody who's listening, go check out Women Waken. And thank you for staying on the podcast as long as you have today, for going the distance on this one.
Oh yeah, it's not a sprint, my man. It's a marathon, and I'm here for it. So thank you for holding the space for this marathon on this awesome Friday.
I love it. Everybody, go check out Women Waken. Thank you for sharing your time and energy with us today. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.